Who wants a Valhalla soundtrack after listening to that opening music? Hell
No
yeah.
doubt.
Hell yes. We've got to do something like that for Christmas this year. Who out there in the chat wants a Valhalla soundtrack? Oh my God, I'm like choking on my vape here. Oh, I know I do.
So long as it includes Mexican Iron Man crying and screaming about his ears hurting or Lupita going after him, I'm in.
Yes, damn straight. Damn straight. Good evening, Adega. How are you
Good
doing? Brother?
evening, Loki. Good evening, everybody in chat. I see the hellos. Doesn't mean I can respond to them, but good evening.
Heck yes. Wookie Lives Matter. How are you doing, brother? You're not going to speak. Oh, and you too, Loki. What's up? He's like a Dago. Yeah.
Hey, he's the Lord of all Wookiee.
Oh, brother. Hell yeah.
Mad respect.
Chris Spurgeon, the Wrench of Wrenches, is here. Purple Valkyrie, thank you so much for being here. The Catman, a.k.a. D.D. Myers. Psychodorf 9. Ahoo. Arwen Avalon, good evening, Lady Arwen. Day Bob, my brother from another mother. Day Bob is here. Good evening. Mark the Emply Tired, the other Bash brother, is in chat. Pat S., how are you doing? And he said, 24/7 Fusion Media just gave y'all a really nice shout out on his stream. Sent us over to UTEL24. Thank you. And hell yeah, brother. I cannot wait to do the next comic book roundtable. Michael Quaid, good evening. Good evening, everybody. If I missed you, I'm so sorry. Hello, everybody. I hope you guys are having a great night. It is Thursday night, and you know what that means. It's time for the unexplained, the mysterious, the strange. Oh yeah, do it pretty good. Give me just a second and let me. Why does it say that folder's empty? Holy shit!
He's been having technical difficulties.
God, I've got all those pictures. I saved all those pictures. Where the hell are they?
But you can just pull them up off of a Google search. It won't matter.
God, save pictures.
Don't use Google.
Save pictures.
Bing or DuckDuckGo.
Dumbass, put them in save pictures. Hold on. Let me move them over to the Adega folder. I don't know why I did that. I don't know why it saved them there. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, and we've got one more. Number 5. All right. So sorry, everybody.
You okay there? You all set?
It's been weird, man. I'm still recovering from the move and getting everything ready for this Saturday. Someone I think earlier was like, "You're doing too much," and I'm like, leave me alone. I'll be fine.
As long as it's fun, no problem.
Yes. Give me 1 second to change these pictures so they will actually show up. What are we going to be talking about tonight, brother? I know I got my story already set.
Well, a couple of weeks ago, I kind of hit the hammer down. I had talked about how people have used other people, their very lives, for chemical stimulation. I talked about adrenochrome, talked about human sacrifice throughout all ages, and that it's not uncommon for any society. Every single one that I recall, there is some form of this type of derangement. And I gave Loki a set of pictures, and if you haven't figured it out yet, we'll get into it. But I did want to get into one specific one because this is one of the early ones that I learned about. When I was in high school, there was an exchange student. I got to be friends with him simply because I'm half native. He was from Navajo country. And so, they had exchanges from off the reservation, came to visit. And I don't remember how Dave Bob's got it right, how we got on the subject. But the thing of Skinwalker I'd never heard of, and I was fascinated. And he just said it in passing, then tried to walk away. And I said, wait, what? And he says, no, we don't talk about this. And it took a while. And finally I got him, I think we were in a church. He felt safe there. And he says, The thing is, you can't talk about these guys. They know when you're talking about them. They will come after you. And I still didn't understand anything about them. So I am going to explain to you what I know from a couple different sources. Purple, I did it on her show, I don't know, 9-10 months ago. We're going to go through it again, but plus I brought in some, you can call them stories or eyewitness accounts, depending on whether or not you want to believe them. But they're numerous, many, many, many.
Well, they also have this in Britain. If correct me if I'm wrong, for anybody that knows, but berries are like shapeshifters, changelings, I believe is what they call them. They replace the baby with a changeling, or they replace the little kid with a changeling that can change form, and it may look like your kid, but it's not really your kid.
These things are in every society. You go into Japanese, you go into Chinese, you go into South American. There's some wild stories that come out of Peru, Africa. This type of thing happens, or is claimed to have happened, all over the place. You can hype it up to mass hysteria. You can hype it up to bad drugs. You can hype it up to all kinds of different things. But what does follow with every single one of these is documented evidence of people either ending up missing or dead. So there is something to it. To what extent, no one really knows except for whoever was involved in it. But like I had mentioned, yeah, it's Navajo. It's a Navajo thing. And most of the technically just skinwalker is involved with the Navajo, although they're close to Pima territory and some other things. And I had mentioned this on Purple's show long ago, that just talking about it is something that most Navajo and most Native Americans are quite terrified to do, simply because, well, one of the stories we'll get into, if I could find the right one, it will explain that sometimes, according to the myth and some of the evidence, you can't get away from it when you talk about it. So let's get into the background of what these things are. Legend goes, hearsay, or those who have escaped from, say that it is, there's a couple of different approaches. So some of you may understand things a little bit different than what I do, or I may not say the same thing that you are thinking of, because there's many different ways that people end up being associated with or becoming skinwalkers. But the general basis is it's a loosely tied society, very, very secretive. They have things like underground huts, escape places, different caves and hideouts under trees and rocks where they will congregate. And in order to become one, you have to do something absolutely horrible. The general consensus among all the people that I've talked to and almost all of the stories that I've heard is that in order to be part of them, whether you're tricked into it or you do it voluntarily, is you have to kill, in the most gruesome and terrible ways, someone that you love. It has to be quite horrific. Disembowelment, dismemberment, cannibalism. Again, that goes along with why I brought it up, was the cannibalism that we talked about a couple weeks ago, where they are stimulated by who knows what. Some say it's a mixture of peyote and human. Some say it's some type of rotted animal. There's various different stories of how or why they become exactly what they become after they murder somebody. But you have to prove that you're able to keep the secrets of the skinwalkers. And like I said, no one really knows for sure. But what happens with them when they get initiated into this secret is they become basically the scourge of the Southwest, especially in the Native American territories, where you never want to be talking about them, never want to see one. You avoid them at all costs because they become superhuman in every respect. They have, like this picture here, most of the descriptions of them tend to be dog-like, animal-like, a chimera between human or dog, or a full-on shapeshifter where you see a ratted, very large animal, dog usually, with the face of a human. Sometimes it's the other way around, and sometimes it's just a human. The myths go that they can change and shift according to the need or whatever they want to do. There are stories of them being able to influence people by thought or by speech, causing people to wander off and to be lost, to be devoured or murdered or what have you. Their abilities are supposed to be just incredibly superhuman. A couple of the stories that I'll read in just a minute talk about, and I'm sure some of you have heard of them, but there are ones where the vast majority of them, but not all of them, are when people are driving out in the open desert. If any of you have been out in the open desert, especially on Native American territory, at night, it's usually not necessarily the big black dog. It's usually a matted brown and black. Sometimes it's a big black dog, but it's they're very much oversized, raggedy wolf looking. So big black dog doesn't necessarily always fit. I have heard big black dog associated more with werewolves, but that isn't the common story that goes with it. Let's go ahead and read one of these. Let me see if I could find there's a couple of them I really wanted to get into. Let's start with this one. This is a group of people that ran into it, and one of them kind of knew what was going on. Now, this is written very poorly. Whoever put this together had a hard time writing. So bear with me if I get hicked up. It's not necessarily my fault. It's just the way things are written. So here we go with this one. We're somewhere on the highway between Widow Rock and Gallup, New Mexico. It had just rained earlier in the day and the road was kind of slick, so we were taking it pretty slow. On the left of the highway, there was nothing but sandstone cliffs, and on the right, there's a huge field separated from the road by a small barbed wire fence. We crest the top of the hill, and down at the bottom of the hill, we see what appears to be a very large dog, sitting back on its haunches in the middle of the road, facing the cliffs. My dad calls over the radio. These are two cars, if I remember right. My dad calls over the radio. Hey, Trav, do you see that big-ass dog? Travis starts yelling back over the radio. That is not a dog. Speed up right now and hit it. He sounds almost hysterical. He just keeps screaming, hit it, hit it, hit it, hit it. JJ, you have to hit it, please, please. Hit the blankety thing right now. So my dad starts to speed up, and as we get closer, I can begin to see it a little bit more clearly. It's covered in this brown, wiry, matted hair that appears to have been dried blood all over it. It's still facing the cliffs, but the moment our headlights hit it, it turned and looked at us, and it has a face. I don't know of how else to describe it other than a mix between a bear's and a human's face. It looks twisted and distorted and almost in pain. As we get closer to the thing, we start to realize it's actually blanking huge. Though it was still sitting on its haunches, it is about shoulder height with a hood on its almost shoulder height with the hood of the truck. We get literally inches from hitting it when it lets out this scream that sounds like something screaming as their lungs were filled with water, and it leaps backwards towards the field, landing just on our side of the barbed wire fence. Then with another leap, it is gone from sight. Travis comes on over the radio. Holy crap. Keep driving. We got to get out of here. We have to go faster. He keeps repeating that last part. We have to get out of here. We have to go faster. Pretty soon, we are speeding like crazy, and just as we start to come near the outskirts of Gallup, we get pulled over. Travis's truck pulls over along with us. Naturally, this makes the cop, a Navajo man himself, very on edge, and he immediately asks why Travis felt the need to pull over as well. Travis says, "We just saw a skinwalker a few miles back, and it's been hunting us." The officer immediately turns white, stammers something about verbal warnings, and gets in his car and takes off. We do the same. That's not an uncommon story. Let me find another one here. All right, here's another one. See, I think this one's written a little bit easier to read. It was evening and the sky was deep red as the sun began to set behind us. We were leaving a nice dusty trail from the dirt road, and the radio was playing music from the only radio station that could be picked up from our nearest town of Holbrook, Arizona. There was nothing unusual, nothing weird. It was at this time that my eyes caught movement of something in the bushes a little up ahead the road to the right of us. I remember slowing down thinking that it was one of the many free-roaming sheep in the area that would dart out in front of the trucks. As I passed where I thought I saw it, I sped up thinking nothing else. Then out of nowhere, I felt this dark feeling of fear and dread. I had no idea why I was feeling this way, but I definitely felt that something was wrong. Sorry about the dog in the back. It's a mood setter. As I played this memory back in my mind, there was only a few clear memories that I have of the evening. I clearly remember looking in my rearview mirror and seeing this dark silhouette of something very tall, very skinny, that seemed to be covered with some kind of hair or fur running behind the truck after us. Whatever it wasn't normal. It wasn't a normal human or human at all. I remember hearing my brother crying and the dog barking ferociously at whatever was chasing us. I remember speeding very fast and shaking violently as the truck bounced on the washboard dirt road. I distinctly remember that this thing was only getting closer as my brother cried, It's coming up on your side." I remember being as scared as hell and thinking that I didn't want to die. At that moment that I thought would be our last, I remember speeding around the bend in the road and seeing a car coming towards us in the opposite direction. At that moment, I felt instant relief and felt that whatever was following us was gone. Shaken up but alive, we made it to my grandmother's house, wondering what the hell had just happened. We ran inside, not looking back, hoping that whatever was chasing us had not followed us home. As we told my grandmother about the experience, she didn't seem surprised at all, which surprised us. She continued by repeating stories that we had already heard at one point or another of black magic, witches, and something that the Navajos call the Yi Nadloshai, or skinwalkers. Needless to say, I didn't even want to look out at any of the windows for the rest of the night. As a matter of fact, I never drove on that reservation at night until I was 21 years old. All right. I got one more, and this one isn't one from on the road. This is, some of you may have been and seen old adobe ruins, some of the old Spanish ruins, and this is a story from someone that his group came and they were looking at the old Spanish ruins when they came upon this thing. And here we go. It was going from wall to wall really quickly, screaming the most blood-curdling scream I've ever imagined. We noped this is what he says. We noped the blank out of there. One of my friends pissed his pants and drove for a few hours to Banladir National Monument, where we planned to camp out for the rest of the weekend. We got to Banladir at probably 6 or 7 in the morning and set up our camp. After a few hours just talking about what the hell happened at the ruins, I went for a walk to take a piss, and probably 300 feet from the camp. This was where everything started getting a little fuzzy. I remember seeing 2 dust devils coming my way, and when I turned around again, 2 of my friends were there, and they were motioning to me to follow them. I couldn't help but to follow them, like I was being pulled behind them in shackles. I followed them for what seemed like 10 to 15 minutes. Then I snapped out of it. Those weren't my friends. They both had bright red hair, with my friends' faces and cat eyes. Both of these friends were brunettes. I stopped walking, and then they looked at me with probably the most terrifying gaze that I'd ever seen. Monsters in movies are nothing compared to this. I turned around and ran as fast as I could back to where the camp was. After 15 minutes of full sprinting, I got back to the rock that I had pissed on at the camp. Everyone was there, still sitting around talking, and didn't even notice that I was gone. I told them what had happened with the look-alike skinwalkers, and we packed up everything and promptly left within 10 minutes and got the hell back to Albuquerque. The point of that story was not only that people have had experiences not just in cars, but on foot. There are stories of them coming into homes and stealing babies, or cheating spouses, or what have you, people that have committed crimes. But in this case, these people had drove quite a long distance, and whatever they had seen on the road had followed them and hunted them on foot over great distances, leading to the fear that a lot of the Navajo have about talking about them, even over great distances. Sometimes it bothers me a little bit just knowing the people that I know, of the fear that they've had of these things. But just like any story, there's going to be embellishment, and there's going to be truth. But the consistency of the stories, of them showing up, and the consistency of them saying that these things can run as fast as cars. I don't know if any of you have ever seen videos. I'm sure you have. There was one in particular that I could think of. There was this naked guy who was just so stoned off his gourd, and that he was doing all kinds of weird things in the middle of the street. I think it was in Chicago, and the cops tased him twice. Didn't even faze him. He just yanked the things out, did a back somersault, and ran away. Some of the things that drugs can do to you to actually bring on superhuman abilities. Similar thing, I think, with these, to where in some regards they can keep up with a 30-mile-an-hour, 40-mile-an-hour car. Some instances, which I think are embellishments, say 65, 70 mile an hour. But people are seeing these things. People on the reservations are disappearing in mass numbers. So you take it or leave it for what it is. But I do believe there's something to it.
Did you ever hear about the zombie guy in Florida?
Oh yeah. I think with the bath salts.
He fried his brain. He fried basically the higher portions of his brain, the higher concept portions, and
Prefrontal lobe. Yeah.
All that was left was basically instinct, and the cops ended up tasing him like 3 different times. Did absolutely nothing to him. Eventually, they had to shoot him because he bit a cop. He was basically a zombie.
Yep.
He fried his higher brain function.
Yep. Yeah, these guys, though, there isn't anything that says that they fried any brain function, but they fried their sense of morality.
Yeah.
which we
Day Bob
see
lizard
all over.
brain.
Yeah. Yeah. No, actually, that in some of the older textbooks is which they call it, being a primitive brain. So he's not far off by saying the lizard brain. But just like probably in every single one of you, you may not realize, but every single one of you in your local governments, there's going to be one like that, or two, or a dozen that have blocked off their humanity. And it's the why they can do those things that you think are so stupid. And yet it's simply because they don't care. It's gone from them. But skinwalkers are one example that I kind of know a little bit about. That's why I wanted to share it with you.
Thank you, brother.
Yep.
Absolutely. That was chilling. Tonight, guys, I have a story from over at Creepypasta. The link is in chat. This was written by Ben Cook, apparently. And let's get going. I remember the first time I witnessed the gruesome sight right in front of me. It had been all over the news for the past week, but until that moment, I was still unable to take any of the stories seriously. I guess that's what happens in a world where the media exaggerates every little story they encounter to pull in more dull-minded viewers. It first started in the wastelands of Russia in 2012. Hikers passing through on their travels discovered bodies half buried in the snow, their abdomens mutilated and the occasional limb removed, only to be found a few meters from the body. At first, these finds were put down to wild animals desperately searching for food in the lifeless tundra. They barely even made news on Russian broadcasting networks. Only the locals of the area, of which there are a few in such a desolate place, really heard the stories. It's strange now that I think about it. The attacks had been all happening through late December and simply went unreported until February when things became more severe. Maybe those doomsday lunatics were onto something after all, and nobody noticed. As the days went on after the initial attacks, panic in the Russian wilderness began to spread as more bodies... Hold on one second, because it all jumped on me. Panic in the Russian wilderness began to spread as more bodies were found in the wild, remained scattered in the snow, and yet an even larger amount of people became reported as missing. It wasn't until mid-January that the first body was discovered in a public area in a small rural town sitting on the edge of the waste. 2 disfigured bodies were discovered by a few poor citizens on their way to work, their limbs scattered all over the streets. This was the first case that managed to work its way into the mainstream media outlets. Everybody just dismissed it as murder cases, the sort that you hear about in foreign countries all the time. What kept my attention, though, was something the autopsy reports discovered. The murder hadn't even happened at night. It happened only an hour before the first poor soul discovered the freshly broken body. I mentally gagged at the thought of finding a body strewn across the floor, still bleeding. As the days went on, more and more reports came in of bodies being found in small villages across Russia, completely destroyed and with no clue as to the cause, just like the originals. All of them had happened in broad daylight, but with no witnesses to recall how it happened. It was February when the first big incident occurred. I remember it distinctly because it happened to be my birthday. Breaking news all over the world, insane stories coming from Russia. It seemed impossible to believe at first. The anchorman on TV spoke quickly in an urgent voice of barricades being erected in Moscow as people from outside ran screaming to its walls, begging to be let in. What he said next made my heart jump. People in cities and towns all over Moscow were being eviscerated in plain daylight. The attacker? Nothing. People were being cut to ribbons in their homes, in the streets, all over Russia. in plain daylight, but there was no visible attacker. I couldn't believe it when I heard it. It had to be a hoax. Didn't make any sense. However, my curiosity overpowered me. I had to see it for myself. I grabbed my laptop and began my troll of some of the darker parts of the web in search of videos of this insane claim. As it turned out, there were thousands of videos on the subject. It was being filmed from a rooftop and involved frightened people of all ages running through the streets in a panic with nothing noticeable chasing them. I remember moving to click another link after thinking nothing would happen, when suddenly a random man in the group started to scream and then explode. It just happened. There was no warning, no sign of attack. The man wasn't even at the back of the group. It seemed as though fate had just picked a random person and decided this one's going to die there and then. I sat in shock as the video ended abruptly. Moving the mouse up again, I clicked on another video and another. This one was being filmed from behind a barricade to hold back fleeing citizens. I guess that was their idea of controlling the population. Various men in military uniforms had lined the barricade with large rifles, looking on at the crying, begging people with no emotion. Then out of nowhere, one of the women at the front of the crowd was ripped apart by the air and thrown across the military's front line. Despite having been reinforced against this sort of thing, I gagged. In a panicked response, the soldiers sprayed their guns at the point of the attack, as if trying to hit the invisible assailant. Their bullets went through the space and took out the civilians behind him. People scattered as the soldiers unloaded their rounds into the crowd, and then spontaneously, one of the soldiers burst apart. The cameraman seemed to panic at this point, and the feed went dead. My mind was struggling to get to grips with itself. I honestly didn't know what to think. I always imagined myself in these situations before, acting like I was in a movie, analyzing every mystery and saving the day by solving it. But this made no sense. The next day, Russia entered lockdown, as did many other countries, in hopes of keeping this ghostly threat out of their nations. News from Russia dropped as a result. It was completely cut off from the rest of the world, and we could only hope they were okay. And then life continued. Of course, people talked about it, but everyone just seemed to stop being afraid. In reality, it seems, we were just trying to put it behind us because of our fear. Humans fear what they don't understand. So it seems not talking about it was a suitable way of combating that fear. It wouldn't last. The year moved on and days became longer. And then the day came. The one I wish I could forget. It was a bright day in the middle of May, and I was out with a group of friends celebrating the completion of another year at university. We were walking and laughing to the in-jokes we had created over the last year, trying to remember them all before we retreated to our hometowns. At one point, we stopped while a few of our party went to buy food from a shop, and I began talking to my closest friend, Ryan. We were midway into a conversation about what game to play online next, and then it was so abrupt, just like in the videos. He was halfway through a word, and then his body just burst into pieces. Blood and entrails splattered across my body. I stumbled back in horror as my mind processed what had just happened. Around me, people ran away from the area, screaming for help, but I barely noticed. Where my best friend once stood was now just a bloody mess, and my mind was never given a chance to prepare itself. I dropped to my knees and vomited on the floor, crying. It was at least 15 minutes before I was able to take control of myself again and actually get up. By that point, the police had arrived and were telling me to remain still as if they thought I had done some unspeakable act. I remember sitting in that gloomy room, barely being able to answer any questions the investigators had for me, simply replaying with a nod or shake of a head. They told me that this wasn't the only place it had happened. It had become a worldwide pandemic. The brief period of peace had just been the calm before the storm. What we thought was sealed in Russia was now everywhere, and it wasn't even spreading from a single point as it had been at the start. It was a full-scale attack. Nowhere was safe. We were evacuated to a military base and defense points in hopes of holding back this invisible invasion. But we all knew it was no use. My family and I were taken to a military installation in the countryside where we stayed for a month. No contact with the outside world was permitted, in fear of giving our location away to whatever it was that was attacking us. A single analog TV was our only view of the outside world. It seemed a few rogue pirate news stations had popped up to keep those locked away, up to date with current events. The quality was terrible, but in a time like that, it was better than nothing. We heard reports of strange lights being seen, not in the sky, but closer to the ground. We were told of countries falling one by one, their entire population wiped out. There was also one report of scientists discovering something in the sky. The report said that they couldn't see it, but whatever it was giving out a lot of energy, and it was big. The size of a small moon, in fact. Images of Russia came in from aerial photographs. Moscow was ablaze. Towering buildings were reduced to rubble, and in their remains shook large, shimmering waves of fire. A close-up of the street showed roads bathed in red with human remains dotted around in several areas. The video feed switched to another aerial clip of a gigantic crater. The host went on to describe the location as a former nuclear power plant that had entered a meltdown 2 months ago due to no one controlling it. At the end of the clip, the cameraman quickly moved upwards to focus on a second helicopter that was now spinning out of control against the window. Flashes of that all too familiar red color could be seen as the video suddenly cut out. The last broadcast on that channel was the most disturbing. We switched the TV on to find the man in tears with streaks of blood down his face. He looked scared and spoke with a weak, trembling voice. They have come. The angels have come for me, Lord. They've taken everything here, and now it's my turn. Judgment Day is here. There's nothing left for me on this earth anymore, but for those who might be left, I think I know how to survive against them. He let out a loud, sharp laugh. Just my luck to find out when it's too late. All you have to do is stay out of the sentence was cut off by a scream. His body was ripped in two right before our eyes. The channel didn't shut off, though. It's still there. All you see now is the decaying corpse of an insane man. One of his eyes limply staring at you through the camera lens. Since then, there were no more accessible channels. Our last view of the outside world was gone. It didn't really matter anymore to us. We were a small group of people left amongst what must have been less than 1 million humans on Earth. The what and where was no longer our concern. For a while, everything was quiet. The soldiers kept us in line. We fed off what rations the base had. We stuck to strict curfews and attempted to socialize and keep ourselves entertained in our new little personal world. We were somehow quite content with our new lives, with no outside world to bother us, no responsibilities or concerns for anything but our little community. On top of that, the lack of news about outside events allowed us to almost forget what had been happening. Until one night at the end of August, I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of a scream. It was on the floor of a large room containing hundreds of other sleeping evacuees. The realization still startled me every time I woke up, even though I had been sleeping in these conditions for the past month. My vision was blurred somewhat as I attempted to focus on my surroundings, and my body appeared to be mildly damp and slightly sticky. I didn't think much of it. I'd been restless nights here, and we were in a cramped, humid bunker. On the far side of the room, there were two dim lights creeping in through the doorways. Someone must have left the light on in the corridor, I thought to myself. It was puzzling. The thoroughness of the soldiers here would have never allowed something like this. All lights had to be switched off at 8 p.m., and they were checked every night. Surely by now a guard would have found this and switched it off again. Maybe it was one of them doing a midnight check. That's when I noticed something odd. One of the lights was moving. Not moving behind the doorway, but it seemed as if the doorway itself was moving. It drifted across the hall, closing in on the other door. At first I thought it must be a soldier with a torch. I winced and rubbed my eyes, attempting to focus on the object then. Just as it merged with the light of the door, I managed to focus on what seemed impossible. It had the shape of a tall, disturbingly thin human, but where the body should be, there was nothing. No abdomen, no limbs, no head. The outline of the mysterious being seemed to just drift across the wall in an area of light. The first thought that entered my mind was inverted shadow. I know it sounds crazy, but if it was, instead of creating a shadow outline in a lit room, something was creating a bright outline in a dark room. This was the best view I could get of the entity, as it seemed to literally merge with the light from the doorway and disappear. My body was frozen at the sight of it out of fear. I chose to lay down and try to get to sleep again, hoping that whatever it was, it wouldn't notice me. It was another long, restless night. I woke up at 8 a.m. Light peered through the small slits in the top of the bunker and kept the room bright enough to see wall to wall in the giant reinforced mass of cement. I wish I hadn't seen it, though. Blood covered the walls where there had once been sleeping bodies. They now laid in the remains of a silent massacre. What I thought had been my own sweat from the night before turned out to be the remains of my parents, who'd once slept beside me. I screamed. Not a single person was spared that night, save for myself. Walking through the base, it seems these things make short work of every human on site, and yet the gates still remain firmly shut. Guards posted on the watch points had their destroyed bodies hanging over the rails. It was so quiet. I sat in the middle of that compound alone, sobbing to myself. I was alone in the world. These things had killed everyone I knew, and everyone I loved was gone. I didn't know what to do. I slept in that compound for 3 days until I saw it again. That man of light, eerily and slowly drifting through the darkness and merging with the light again. This time I could have sworn he noticed me. He stopped and turned till his head was on with me and just stared at me. I couldn't move. My body was just frozen. And then it left. I don't know why they kept sparing me. Was it for amusement? Did they pity me? Was it something else? I just couldn't get my head around any of it. After that night, I took as many supplies from the base as I could and journeyed towards the nearest village, which was where I now reside. I managed to find a house with a basement and locked myself in there with the supplies, but I never turned the light on anymore. For 3 weeks, I've been living in total darkness. Not because I think they'll find me, but I think I know what these things are now. I read a book that detailed a possible route a species may take in its evolutionary course. The species would evolve beyond the simple realm of the physical and become a being of pure energy. When a species would reach this point, it would obtain near omniscient knowledge, and have no care for life or death anymore. What the intentions of such a hyper-powerful species would be are impossible to predict, since their minds are so much more advanced than ours. It seems in our universe, a species got there before us. They are the light. Where we always feared an alien species abducting us in the middle of the night, turns out that darkness is our only safety from the real threat. 2 days ago, the second star appeared, a red giant that now sits opposite our sun, bathing both halves of the earth in light. And now there is no longer night in this world. There is no place to hide on the outside. I don't know what they want with our planet or why they chose to kill us all, but I know this. They have killed everyone here. If you're out there, don't go into the light. Stick to the shadows if you want any chance of living. Darkness doesn't kill them, but it will slow them down. There is a light coming from beneath the basement door. I have to go. Good luck. Thomas Everett, 1810-2023.
That was really cool. Who wrote that one?
That was, give me 1 second. I don't know how these are going to end either, folks. So I just read the first paragraph. Ben Cook, it says.
That one was really good.
So he did Starlight, and that's the only story he's got. So absolutely wonderful story, though. Thank you, Ben Cook, if you're out there.
Yes.
Absolutely chilling. Wow. Thank you guys so very much for hanging out with me and Adega tonight. It has been an absolute blast. I love getting to tell stories like that. I love hanging out with Adega on Thursdays. We will be back. Too. We will be back tomorrow morning, and we will be talking about the ScarJo lawsuit against Disney. So, yay. We're going to burn some shit down tomorrow. I absolutely love doing these. Hello, Lady Mist. It's so good to see you.
Hello.
So we'll be back next week, and we've got a special show coming up on Saturday with me and Mexican Iron Man, pre-show for Echo Base Network. If you guys can make it, that is going to start at 5 p.m. and go all the way to 6:30 p.m. when they start their lead up to their program at 7. So hopefully you guys can make it. Thank you so very much for being here. Thank you for hanging out with me and Adega. Do you have anything before we get out of here?
Just be good so the skinwalkers don't get you.
That's right. Or those beams of light. Everybody take care. Have a great one. And we will catch you guys next time.
These videos are tremendous. Like, comment, and subscribe, and hammer that notification bell.